Yeah, no, it's a good pod for that. So as we are actually now live recording, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the pod. This will be the Week 13 recap, and then the conference title week preview. We've got, as you guys heard from the newly anointed Dr. Tolman, Dave from New Orleans, PhD. Congratulations in order to you, sir.
Thanks, y'all.
Very, very well
The,
done.
the doctor's in the house making calls on college football today.
Yeah, well, now we actually have we got somebody with some brains on the pod now, so that's good for us. But
Fortunately, the brains don't always apply to some of the stuff we talk about.
yeah, more or less, yeah. So as you guys can see, I am solo on camera again. Steele bailed something about being a father and working and being responsible, but we've got Dr. Dave and then we've got Addison on. So we'll get into the Week 13 recap, our winners and losers, conference title preview, all that kind of good stuff. So first question for you guys. Um, Dr. Tolman, I will start with you. UNC is hiring Mack Brown.
Oh, this is what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so give me your thoughts on that.
That's actually going to be one of my losers for the week. Is both sides because one, I've never thought that Mack Brown is a great coach, like a great, just like X's and O's coach. I think his strength as a coach is recruiting, but you're going to North Carolina, which it's a basketball state. It's a basketball school. And we've been down this road before with North Carolina and Butch Davis. So I don't see it being any better than that was.
Yeah, I was. I think I looked at some stuff from Bill Connolly that he was tweeting about how Mack Brown averaged like essentially like a top 15 recruiting class every year or better, but he only averaged like 7.5 wins a year. So I don't get like hiring basically like a recycled 60 something year old head coach. Like it just doesn't make sense
Yeah,
to
like
me.
and also like Mack Brown loses here too. Like, why do you give up your cushy analyst job at ESPN to go to a basketball school?
Yeah, I don't know. That's why I was going to ask you guys. Like I don't get it. Addison, what are your thoughts on that?
Just really bizarre. Like, I didn't even think Mack Brown is an option. Like, where
Right.
the hell? Like, apparently they just like were nostalgic like for the '90s, and they wanted to go with Mack Brown, considering he basically got a shot at Texas because he was able to do a solid job at North Carolina back then. But yeah, at this point, like like Tolman said, I didn't really think Mack Brown was that good of a coach at Texas. Like, he had Vince Young and Colt McCoy, but once McCoy was gone, he was pretty awful as a coach. And at this point in his career, like I don't know why you're hiring 67-year-old Mack Brown.
Would you guys, wouldn't you, so I think we're probably on the same page with this. Like, wouldn't you agree that, I was trying to think randomly before this pod started of like younger coaches that would maybe make sense, like maybe Cliff Kingsbury or like maybe like Major Applewhite. Like, are those better candidates or like, I mean,
Well, I think the thing with those guys as candidates with Kingsbury and Applewhite, those
yeah,
are two of the more bright offensive minds in
yeah.
the game right now. And I actually think that the way that things are trending in the NFL, those guys are going to get gobbled up by the NFL and be like great NFL offensive coordinators.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, definitely with the way the league is trending, I could definitely see that. So yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. If we have some other random topics, we'll get into those in a little bit. But let's get into the Week 13 recap. We had 3 games that we previewed last weekend. Let's start with Oklahoma at West Virginia. Certainly a shootout like we all expected, but maybe to the extent that I think it made us want to puke a little bit as far as there like literally was zero defense in this game. Addison, I'll start with you. Your thoughts overall on that game? Anything surprising, or did you? What was your takeaway? I guess as far as that game is concerned.
Well, it went pretty much like we thought. There was zero defense played. Well, I can't say zero. Like Oklahoma actually got a couple of defensive scores, but
Right.
you know, in terms of like slowing down these offenses, like that didn't happen.
Yeah.
I forget what Oklahoma finished up with like yards per play, but for a while they were like 13 or 14 or something.
Yeah, I think it was like 11
Yeah,
maybe at
yeah,
the end or something. Yeah.
which is crazy.
Right.
But I mean, West Virginia put up over 700 yards. Like, I don't know how you lose with that many yards, but Oklahoma's actually won 2 games in like the last 3 years where they give up 700 yards. That's just Big 12 football. Yeah, it's just a lot of offense. Oklahoma still, doesn't play any defense. Seems like they're like worse every week too, but they keep winning. So yeah, I don't know. Besides that, I don't really have much to say. Went kind of the way I thought it would.
Yeah. Tolman, any additional thoughts on that game or any different kind of like takeaway?
No, it went the way I thought it was going to go. Just a big offensive shootout. A few weeks ago, I had kind of maybe believed that Oklahoma could be a team that could challenge Alabama just because they could score on them. But now it's to the point where their defense is so awful that I don't see them beating any elite teams.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think their offense is so good that, I think they're very dangerous, but these teams that they're going to be going up against have the kind of offenses that are like for sure going to be able to score on them. I mean, I know it was a look ahead spot, but for God's sakes, Kansas scored 40 on them. I mean, I just see a lot of games in their schedule that there's teams that just. I know it's the Big 12, but I don't feel very confident about them against these elite teams that I feel like will at least get a few stops on them, and I just don't think Oklahoma will ever stop any of those teams. So I think it's gonna be tough for them, but we'll get into their preview obviously against Texas coming up. Let's move on to the second game, the Apple Cup, which ended up being kind of like fun to watch. I thought just because of all the snow that was there, but Washington at Washington State. Washington went over there and pretty much controlled that game for its entirety. Addison, your takeaway from that game, your thoughts about Washington in general, I guess?
It was kind of a fun game to watch just because of the snow, and that made things kind of sloppy too. There were a lot of turnovers in this game, a lot of fumbles. Washington came out early and kind of controlled things, and defensively they played really well. I mean, that's what Washington does best. So once they got the lead, they didn't really. Washington State tried to get back into it, but then Washington kind of killed off the game with a long touchdown run late in that game.
Yeah, I think I was wondering during the game if there wasn't all that snow, if it could have been different because Washington State has definitely been not a very good team on the ground. They've been pretty average efficiency wise. They don't create a lot of explosive plays on the ground, but passing wise, I pointed out that they were going to complete a lot of passes, and I didn't think that Gardner Minshew would face a lot of pressure, but I like I said, I think it could be some of the weather as far as like the snow just making things so ridiculous. But Washington was able to get a little bit of pressure. I think they were able to get some blitzes through, but they definitely were able to control the lines. Their running game was very efficient. Tolman, your thoughts on that game overall? Anything different from Addison?
No, not really. Just I think the snow definitely neutralized, Washington State's strength.
Yeah.
I loved watching the game just because it felt like, if it snowed for us on Thanksgiving, it felt like kind of like our backyard snow football Thanksgiving game.
Yeah, right.
I felt like that was really cool.
Yeah.
But also, Washington, I still think they have the most physical line play in the Pac-12, and that happened to work out for them in that game when ball control was going to be the important thing, and that's actually an important point I'll make when we preview their game for next week is about their physicality.
Okay. Yeah, it's actually interesting. I'm looking at their metrics now, and in all three of the games they lost this year, their post-game win expectancy was at least 55% or better. So I think they were kind of unfortunate in a couple of the games, but this is a team that if they had a few different, if they had the ball bounce maybe their way, maybe we're talking about them as a playoff contender. But I do think they're probably the best team in the Pac-12 at this point. Even with the snow, I felt like as you alluded to, Tolman, with their physicality, I think that was going to be the edge in that game. That we seemed to favor Washington State, but I think we saw that maybe that was potentially the wrong side, and I think the snow might, like we said a couple times, it might skew our view a little bit. But yeah, we'll preview them.
I had liked Washington State just based on eye test.
Yeah.
For the whole year, but the reason I didn't end up betting that game was because just every metric that I looked at, every Vegas insider, they have Washington State between 15 and 20 in terms of rankings of better teams. So I was like, stay away from that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I kind of for fun have been putting up some power ratings on Twitter, and I have Washington 8, and I mean they're a 3-loss team, but this year's really weird because I think there's a lot of teams that have 2 and 3 losses that you could argue being up there. I generally think Washington and Mississippi State are a little bit undervalued according to the public, just because their brand of football is a little more ugly. So I think they get undervalued a little bit. But yeah, we'll definitely preview them coming up, obviously, as they play Utah. But let's move into the last game. Obviously, the greatest game ever this year, Michigan at Ohio State. Clearly, this was just a beatdown in every sense of the word. I mean, there's literally nothing that OSU couldn't do against these guys offensively. Defensively, they created enough havoc, and I think held Michigan in check as far as the explosives, which has been Ohio State's Achilles heel all year. But, Dave, I'll go to you first. Your thoughts on this amazing outcome and your thoughts on Ohio State moving forward here.
So, I mean, my thoughts are just whoop that ass.
Yeah.
This was supposed to be the year that if there was going to be any year that Michigan was going to beat us, it was going to be this year.
Yeah.
Just based on what we've seen from Ohio State especially in the last several weeks. But so my takeaways were, this is actually a question for you guys. Is Michigan capable, just because of their style of play, are they capable of having an explosive offense? That's question number one.
Okay.
Two, I think the way that Michigan plays and the way that they recruit, I think Michigan, they have a speed problem. Ohio State is clearly just a faster team, and that's what hurt. I think that's what hurt them so much in the game.
Yeah. Addison, do you want to start with those, and then I'll follow up?
Yeah, well, the speed thing, yeah, I totally agree with Tolman on that. And, we talked last week going into this game, Michigan's pass rush, that's how you neutralize Haskins. How much pressure were they going to be able to get on him? Ohio State had struggled a little bit with that this year. That was completely neutralized. I thought Ohio State's line played amazing, and
that was the most surprising thing about the game to me.
Yeah, and Haskins, with plenty of time to throw, Ohio State's playmakers just, like you said, there was just way too much speed. We were winning all the individual matchups, and it was just flat out domination by our offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of alluded to this in the preview of this game, as I said that I felt like there were a lot of OSU fans that were wanting us we've had trouble establishing the run this year, and OSU's always been known as a run heavy team, even with the spread offense under Urban. But I thought it was wrong to think that we should try to play Michigan like in a phone booth. It just didn't make sense to me. I thought the advantage would be through the air. I didn't think Michigan was quite as slow as I thought they were going into this game. Like I had seen them play a few times this year. I didn't think they were that slow. But the more I thought about it after this game on Saturday, I was like, well, who have they really played that's that fast? So maybe I was just kind of like blinded by that fact. But
did you think, like, when you actually watched the game though, did you think they looked slow? I thought they did.
oh, absolutely, yeah,
When you get continuously beat that bad on crossing routes,
yeah.
I mean, that to me is like the number one sign is like you just can't.
Yeah, OSU just ran.
I think they had to abandon man-to-man coverage in the second half, basically.
Yeah, I mean, they just drew up a scheme where it was just a bunch of man beater routes that weren't like that complicated, and I think that.
Yeah, I mean, they were getting. I mean, they didn't always connect. They were also getting torched on wheel routes.
Yeah, right.
By Mike Weber. I mean.
Yeah,
and it was like everyone, like Chris Olave was making plays, and we even had Demario McCall in there. Had, like you said, had a wheel route down the sideline right before halftime.
Yeah,
it was like everyone at Ohio State pretty much throughout their own offense was making plays.
Yeah, and I think you could tell that it was an emphasis on like the guys that had more speed in general. And I remember reading something after the game that Haskins said all week watching film, he was just like licking his chops seeing what they could exploit on offense, and he was obviously right about that. And the most surprising thing for sure was the offensive line play. I can't remember any play where I felt like Haskins was like under duress. It was amazing to me.
0 sacks for Michigan, and I don't really remember any plays either where he was under pressure that much.
Yeah, so I still think Michigan is a very good football team this year, but as we all seem to agree, especially this year where it seems like there's a lot of speed with these more these like elite offenses that I just don't think Michigan could keep up. They clearly have a speed problem. I agree with you, Tolman, that I think Harbaugh's a little stubborn with how he's recruiting and like how they have been, like the schemes that they've implemented. I think he needs to become a little bit more innovative because, like you said, this was the game they were going to win. And it just seems like now there's so much pressure on them to just win this game alone, let alone, win the Big Ten or whatever, which they're going to need to beat us to do that. It seems like it's going to be interesting to see moving forward. I think he's recruiting pretty well, but then again, like we said, maybe he's not recruiting the right type of guys. I'm not sure. It's interesting.
Yeah, look, so the final point about the speed is on I guess it's a pass now, the jet sweep.
Yeah.
Harris Campbell created 20 yards of separation just like instantaneously.
Right.
I mean, it was just like it was.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So yeah, we'll obviously we're going to preview the Big Ten championship game. We'll talk about OSU moving forward, but let's get into now the winners and losers segment. Do you guys have those ready?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
All right, yeah. Why don't you start, and then I'll let Addison go after you, and I'll follow up.
I think winner was Chris Olave.
Yeah.
That was awesome. I mean, two targets, 2 catches, 2 touchdowns, block punt. We had kind of heard that he maybe been coming on a little bit, but he had a nice little coming out party, so it'll be fun to watch the next couple of years.
For sure.
My loser is, I guess it's probably USC because they're keep retaining Clay Helton.
Yeah.
I was hoping to get into this at some point.
Yeah.
I guess we'll do it now. Like,
sure.
I haven't seen it for the last several years. They always have a lot of talent, and even last year when they played us in the Rose Bowl, I feel like I don't see him as a coach. I don't see him as an LA guy with a program with the prestige like USC.
Yeah, I think he sucks. I think I saw some stat without Darnold against ranked teams. He's like 2-13 or something like that. And as an underdog, he has like a horrific record. I just think that like game management wise, like they seem to always get outplayed in the third quarter and like second halves, and that's where you see like a lot of the great coaches make their adjustments in games. So I I totally agree. I don't know what they're doing. I think they're wasting time with him. Addison, I think we've covered the Clay Helton thing before. I mean, I think you also think he's pretty shitty, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he like underperforms with the talent he has,
Yeah.
and I just for a school like USC, I don't know why he's there. They can definitely get someone better.
Yeah. I don't get it. It's not like they're UNC and they have to hire Mack Brown. Like I don't understand what the hell is happening. But yeah, so
I have one more loser.
okay, yeah, go for it.
So LSU is now 0 for 2 in premature Gatorade celebration.
That was going to be one of my losers. Yeah.
Maybe transition. You can talk about it. I think we have to talk about that game because LSU should have won it like 8 different times.
Yeah. So
it's kind of hilarious that they did it and it kept going on the way it did.
yeah, I guess we can transition to mine and I'll start with that. I mean, it's not his fault, but I guess Coach O was like my loser as far as getting the Gatorade bath and then losing the game. That game was obviously I mean, this is an understatement, but it was just insane. 7 overtimes, right? 74-72. A weird accidental kneel down.
Interesting point on that 74-72.
Yeah.
The last 3 matches, the last 3 basketball games between A&M and LSU have like been way under that.
Yeah.
The teams have been in the 50s.
Yeah, it's just pure insanity. And like I thought at the end of the game, a really horrific PI call. The ball was just not catchable. PI call on Greedy Williams, I believe. So I thought it was a game against 2 pretty evenly matched squads. I felt like LSU had been a little overrated all year. I felt like A&M had actually been a little underrated. But, I mean, this game was obviously very entertaining. It just would never freaking end at the end of the night when I was trying to go to bed. But, unfortunately, LSU with another premature Gatorade bath, so I feel like they have to be a loser. I guess I'll keep going with the losers, and then I'll kind of be like a reverse thing here. I'll go with my winners after. Virginia, I mean, for God's sakes, like, it's just like Michigan. If this was the year that you were going to beat Virginia Tech, this was the year to do it. They go into Blacksburg as like a 4.5-point favorite or 4-point favorite, and they were basically down like double digits at one point. They stormed back, but then they end up losing the game in overtime, I believe. And I just, if they, like I said, if they were going to win against this program at any point, I felt like it was going to be this year. But again, they lost, so I just don't know when they're going to beat them.
Carruthers is and always will be the Carruthers.
Yeah, pretty much. Just a bunch of Zima drinking assholes. So Arkansas is my third loser and my last one. They went defeated in SEC play. I know they have a new coach this year, but I mean, for God's sakes, like you can't win one game. Like I know the SEC it's good, but like that's just pathetic to me that you just can't win a game.
Beat Ole Miss or something.
Like right, or like can't you like I don't know beat Vandy like
Missouri.
Right.
You shoot out Missouri and beat them.
Yeah, I don't get it. Yeah, so couple quick winners. I'll just give them at the same time, just so we can get to Addison. Couple programs that were looking to become bowl eligible have some coaches that I think are gonna help turn their programs around. Minnesota, PJ Fleck, they went into Madison and absolutely stomped Wisconsin to become bowl eligible. Baylor beats Texas Tech. And, after all the scandal they had, Matt Rule is trying to get that program turned around. I predicted that I thought they could be a Big 12 contender coming up in the next few years, but they ended up getting Cliff Kingsbury fired. So they are my 2 winners for the week. Addison, your...
And Purdue got that. Purdue did the bowl eligible.
They did. That was also I'm glad you pointed out, it was my best bet of the week. So that was good that ended up working out. Addison, your winners and losers.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, I had no idea that LSU A&M game, like the craziness that had happened in that until the next day. Because for one, I was busy celebrating the ass kicking of Michigan.
Yeah.
And
were you practicing ball security with the football running around High Street?
No, I should have been. I didn't have a football. But yeah. So I was also watching the Notre Dame game, so I had no idea what was going on in that A&M game, but it sounded like it was pretty nuts. So, but anyway, my winner this week actually is Notre Dame, because they are the only team so far that has actually clinched a playoff spot for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any, I know people are trying to say that, or Steele is always paranoid about it.
Those people are stupid. They're in. Yeah.
They're in. There's no question.
Yeah.
They're undefeated. They play teams that are better than what UCF plays, so yeah, they're in.
Yeah.
And my loser is Michigan.
Clearly.
Yeah. They still suck. Like we said, this was the year that Michigan was supposed to finally beat Ohio State. And, the fact that they weren't able to do it, and not only that, just get their asses kicked as bad as they did, I just feel like we broke them. And, it's just a devastating loss for their program, for their fans. Like, they feel like they can't ever beat us again at this point.
It's pretty bad. I was thinking about nominating Higdon just because of the whole guarantee thing, and Winovich kind of backed that up. There's a lot of players that were like, yeah, we back our guy, and then you go in and get your ass destroyed. So definitely a loser for the week. I felt like that's a pretty unanimous one, but I'm glad that since Tolman and I decided to leave them out, I'm glad somebody brought it up because it makes sense. But
it had to be brought up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. Well, yeah, those are the winners and losers. Let's get into these conference title games. And, a few of these have got some pretty large spreads, but there's still a lot at stake for, all these teams. There's definitely some playoff scenarios that could be changing, this different dynamics with these games. But let's start with one that I think is not going to take very long, the ACC Pitt and Clemson. Clemson, I believe, is a 27.5 point favorite right now. That line has moved from 23 to 27.5. My one thought and my one just overall thought on this game is Pitt does one thing really well, and that's run the football down your throat. And Clemson is arguably the best run-stopping team in the country. So my question to you guys is, how can Pitt possibly move the ball and win this game? How do they actually pull off the upset? Addison, I'll start with you. I mean, what do you do if you're Pitt? How can you actually be competitive in this game?
I don't really know.
Yeah, right. Can you?
I feel like this game is completely irrelevant and no one's going to watch it.
Right.
Because I don't give Pitt really a chance to win this game.
Yeah.
Like you said, they can only do one thing, and that's probably going to get completely shut down. It's kind of like when BC was going up against Clemson,
Yeah.
It could be that it could be that type of game. So the 27 points or 27.5 or whatever it is, I don't know. I might take the points there. I just don't think it's going to be close,
Yeah, if I had to lean, I think I would actually lean Clemson. And I hate laying that many points, but it's the problem I have is it's not like Pitt runs the ball and plays good defense. Their defense is, their efficiency wise, they're pretty average, and they give up a lot of explosive plays on the ground, which obviously Clemson has backs that can ship it at any point. And I just don't think Pitt can all of a sudden just decide to throw on first down, or I don't think they're just going to be able to implement play action. I agree that when I first off the top of my head thought of this game, I thought Clemson BC right away. Dave, do you have a lean against the number? Does Pitt have any chance in hell in winning this game?
I like the over 53 because I think that Clemson might just be able to score 53 points on its defense.
They might, yeah.
So regardless of if they can get any scores, I mean, I don't think Pitt, in terms of Pitt scoring, you just can't be one-dimensional against Clemson.
Yeah.
So maybe they bust a long run, which they've done against some other inferior ACC opponents this year, but I don't see this being close. And yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I figured that would be a quick one. I wanted to get that out of the way. Let's move on to a game that has a lot more intrigue. Red River Rivalry Part 2, Texas, Oklahoma. I believe the line currently is 7.5. It opened at 5. Got bet up to 7.5 pretty quickly. Tolman, I'll start with you. Your lean against the number. Who's going to actually – I think we should actually like pick winners, I guess, just because it is like a conference title type of game. So a lean against the number, who you actually think is going to win. Your thoughts on how this game is going to go the second time around.
My lean against the number is Texas. I like Texas at plus 7.5 now.
Yeah.
I like Oklahoma to win the game on the field. But, we have, as any Big 12 game involving Oklahoma, we have the potential for a shootout. But the reason that I would take Texas getting 7.5 is that Texas actually, I think they have a pretty good red zone defense. So maybe they can get a couple stops and hold Oklahoma to field goals. But other than that, I like Oklahoma to win the game on the field.
Okay. Addison, your lean against the number, your actual winner. How do you same thing. How do you think it's going to go?
Like Tolman was saying, if Texas can actually hold Oklahoma to some field goals, I really think Texas has a chance to win. I agree that I would take Texas plus 7.5 right now, and also the over/under is 78, since we're going to have to talk about that too.
Yeah.
Only one Oklahoma game this year has gone under, and it was the Army game. So I would definitely take over if I'll probably take it anyway.
Do we have an injury report for Texas? I feel like they held a lot of guys out against Kansas.
Yeah, I was looking at that. The main one I was concerned about was Ellinger, but he played against Kansas, so I think he's good to go. I don't know right now of anything like major, but I haven't heard anything to make me think that they're missing anybody significant for this game. So I think this will surprise you guys a little bit. Oklahoma, I got Oklahoma at -7. That's actually going to be my best bet for the week. I think part of that is maybe because we don't have quite as many games to pick from, but as you guys talked about with Texas is pretty decent in the red zone. I don't know how many times Oklahoma's going to actually end up just in the red zone, though. They obviously are creating like a crazy amount of explosive plays on offense, and Texas is giving up a ton of those. Texas is also not creating a ton of explosive plays on offense. Now, there's no arguing that they're going to move the football in Oklahoma. They did in the first game. Everybody can move the ball in Oklahoma, but I think Oklahoma is going to create a few more explosives to where I'm not sure Texas is going to quite keep up this time. I think where you guys have a pretty strong argument is Herman is very good as an underdog. So that could be something that works against me, but I like Lincoln Riley in the spot. I think he knows that, this is a game that they don't want to look like kind of mediocre or like look like they just pulled it out if OSU destroys Northwestern. So I actually do like Oklahoma -7 this week. And it seems like the majority of tickets are on Texas, so I feel like people like the underdog in the spot. But I think it sets up pretty well for Oklahoma. So I think it'll be an interesting game. It seems like we all tend to favor Oklahoma on the field. I think we're all rooting for Texas, obviously. But it'll be an interesting game. I think this game's at noon, right, on Saturday?
Yeah, it's a neuter.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool. It gives us like a first, interesting game to watch there.
Y'all don't want to watch the American Conference Championship or the Sun Belt?
Not particularly. Do you?
No,
I think Virginia Tech plays Marshall at noon too.
Yeah, I was considering taking Marshall.
I took Marshall for an hour.
Yeah, see, like
does Virginia Tech need that game to be bowl eligible?
they do. Yeah, that's why they scheduled it.
Well, I was gonna say if they didn't need it to be bowl eligible, that would just be like, why are you playing this?
Yeah. They scheduled it. It was
one more thing on Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I feel like their last 4 weeks, have been really shaky.
Yeah.
They could have. Well, they didn't really have a chance to lose in the Kansas game, but they gave up 40 points to Kansas.
Yeah.
But the other games against Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, all very losable games for them, and obviously playing like trash on defense. So I definitely think Texas has a chance, and that's one of the reasons I would take the points.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I think they have a shot. I just see it. I think a big thing too is like I'm kind of hanging my hat a little bit on like the revenge factor too. Like I feel like Oklahoma's going to come out pissed off, like wanting to show that they shouldn't have lost that game against Texas the first time around. So I don't know. I could see it both ways. I like what Oklahoma brings to the table this week. But let's move on to the Big Ten championship now. Northwestern and Ohio State. Northwestern certainly a little bit more of a surprising West winner this year. When we did the Big Ten preview, we said like maybe if they didn't have the schedule they had, we felt like they actually had the kind of team that could win this division, but none of us were seriously considering them. We seem to be more Wisconsin or Iowa heavy. I still think Iowa's the best team in that division, but they obviously lost to Northwestern. So your guys' Addison, I'll start with you. The line is 14. I believe it opened at 13.5. Your lean against that number, who wins on the field, which I think is pretty obvious, and then your overall thoughts on how you think the game will actually go.
Well, Northwestern, I feel like is they're a weird team because I think that they're always like this too, but like what their metrics are on paper, they always seem to they play better than them. So it's kind of weird.
Yeah, like they are.
I don't think it's weird at all because I think that they're very well coached and they're a very disciplined team.
Yeah, so like here's their actual metrics. Like offensively, like rushing S&P, they're ranked 122nd. Passing, they're ranked 80th, and in passing explosiveness, they're 124th. So it's like I don't know how they're going to move the ball in this game. Like Addison, how are they? I mean, look, we know what Ohio State's deficiencies on defense have been talked about on this pod a number of times. But the thing is, like we saw with teams that lacked explosiveness on offense, Sparty, Michigan, a couple of like the really bad teams that we played earlier in the year. I mean, is Northwestern going to actually be able to move the ball and score points in this game?
So, based on what we saw last week, and this is kind of like how I'm thinking about college football playoff rankings right now is I think right now I would trust Ohio State's defense to get stops over Oklahoma's defense based on what we saw last week.
Right.
They got enough stops and they put enough pressure.
Right.
Or they put a ton of pressure on the quarterback and got into the backfield on run plays. So I have a little more trust in Ohio State's defense right now to get stops.
Yeah, I think something else to point out that I found that Northwestern has been pretty solid against the run. It's pretty obvious that they usually want to kind of play games in a phone booth, but as far as their pass defense, they cannot get to the quarterback, and they're allowing a passing completion rate of they're ranked 98th in the country in that. So I feel like, wouldn't you guys think it's going to be the same game plan as Michigan? Like, just burn them with our speed, let Haskins just dominate them. Like, you probably just don't want to line up and just try to run into this front seven, right?
Yeah, and yeah, I agree with you. We should be able to. They're kind of like Northwestern's kind of like a version of Sparty, you know,
Yeah,
not very good on offense, like pretty solid on defense.
yeah,
But yeah, we should be able to exploit some things on them defensively through the air. Um, Obviously, if we play like we did last week, then it's going to be another blowout. The question is, can we be consistent, for once this year and actually put a few good games together?
Is that who Ohio State really is, or was it just because they were motivated for the game?
Yeah, that's the question. And if we come out and we blow them out,
Then
what was that?
then then you have to put them in the playoff.
yeah.
Other things that you have to
So
happen.
yeah, look, on paper, the metrics it has OSU like closer to they should be like a 20 to 21 point favored. I think you can kind of see like the nuances of like situational, like how like lines are based on like scenarios, and not like always just based on the metrics. Like OSU, as you guys alluded to, is coming off of like the most emotional game any of these kids have probably ever played. Um, Northwestern is incredibly good as a double-digit dog under Pat Fitzgerald, so I think that's why you see the line a little bit lower at 14. Um, as far as against
Northwestern this year, they've as an underdog they had one push against Notre Dame. I guess it depends on what number you got it at, but all the other games as a dog they won against the spread. They won outright 5 of those games.
Yeah.
And then as a favorite, they've been really bad.
I think I lean OSU only because I know they had the emotional blowout against Michigan, but this game, these kids, I hope it's not from like a fan's perspective, the kind of pressure where they are thinking right off the bat, like we have to like go for the home run and knock these guys out. Like just play your game and you should be able to like score enough to make it look like that. But I think they know they need to look good, and I think the motivation will be there to do that. But this would be a no bet for me just because of what we just said. Ohio State's been super inconsistent this year. They basically showed their A game for one game. And this could be a spot where like first half could look a little slow. I'm not gonna lie. I think there could be a little bit of that like wear off from like the Michigan game, and where you do have a little bit of that like emotional letdown. But I think at the end though they should be better than 2 touchdowns. Do you guys feel that way, or would you actually lean Northwestern in the points?
I feel I 100% lean Ohio State in the points.
Okay.
And the only reason I'm not betting it is just a superstitious thing.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to get into the college football playoff, and the 2 times that I've taken Ohio State giving points this year have been the Maryland and the Nebraska game, and that didn't work out. So I'm just staying away and just hoping for like a Big Ten championship blowout that puts us in the playoff.
Okay, Addison, do you have a lean against the number if you had to?
Yeah, my lean is Ohio State.
Okay.
Although, if we do come out slow, like you mentioned, as a possibility, I would be a little nervous about that because that's the kind of game Northwestern's going to want to play.
If I
They're
was like,
going to want to keep it low scoring, and if we leave them in the game a little bit, they're going to have some confidence. But if Ohio State comes out, gets a lead early, I think that's the kind of situation where we could end up running away with this game.
yeah, I agree with that. And that's, if I wasn't an OSU fan and just like looking at it from a betting perspective, I think Northwestern first half might actually not be a bad play. But like you said, that could blow up in your face. If OSU comes out with their hair on fire, even close to what the emotion they played with last week, they're going to rout those guys. So we'll see. It'll be interesting.
I don't think the red zone. I'm not sure if the red zone issue's fixed.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that is yet. But, at least the running game is fixed, and the O line actually looks like they, have some toughness again.
Yeah, yeah. All right, yeah. Well, we'll see moving forward. Hopefully, we get what we want out of that game. Let's move on to the Pac-12 championship. I believe that's Friday night. Washington is playing Utah. I believe that line is up. I believe it's 5. I think it opened like 3.5 or so. So obviously being bet in favor of Washington. Utah is still down both quarterback and running back. Tyler Huntley and I believe Zach Moss, the running back. Utah's been very good this year, but it's they've been pretty good in the last couple games without those guys. But Washington's a little bit of a different animal for them, I think, coming up. It's as far as like the metrics, these teams are actually kind of similar with how they play. Like Washington is not explosive on offense. They're just pretty darn efficient. Defensively, they don't give up big plays. They haven't been like quite as elite defensively as we thought they would be, but they've actually been looking better the last few weeks. They look quite good against Washington State, albeit the snowstorm or whatever. But Tolman, I'll start with you. Your lean against the number or bet if you've made one. How do you see this game going?
I already bet Washington at -5.
Okay.
I looked at the same things that you did on the metrics. They're two very, very evenly matched teams. Utah is down a couple players, but the real reason that I picked Washington in this spot is just because I feel like Washington is by far playing the best out of anybody in the Pac-12. They're the most physical team in the Pac-12. They've been there before in the last couple of years. Like Browning and Gaskin have experience in bigger games, and I think Utah just got there. They just kind of emerged from a pack of mediocre Pac-12 South teams, so that's why I got Washington.
Okay, yeah. Addison, your thoughts on the game, your lean against the number, who's going to win the Pac-12 championship?
I would lean Washington as well. They haven't been good against the spread this year. They've only covered 3 times, but I think earlier in the year they were a little bit overvalued, and then now at this point, I think they're, especially with Utah's injuries, they're probably a little undervalued in this game, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The first time they played Washington was a 4-point dog on the road, and they won pretty easily in a really defensive game. And we talked about earlier, Washington, they're not, like, some of their losses were kind of fluky. Like, I thought they definitely should have beat Auburn. I thought they should have beat Oregon.
Yeah. They should have beat Cal.
Field goal at the end of that game.
Yeah.
Doesn't go to OT and they win.
Right.
But they had to make one offensive play against Cal to win.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, they're close to being like a team that's in the playoff hunt. If they had won a couple of those games that they could have.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think they're as good as like the other playoff contenders, but they're still a pretty good team, and I think they're the better team. I would lay the points here.
Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned how they went, into Utah and beat them earlier in the year in week 3. And, usually like I think the revenge factor is a pretty big deal if it is, especially if it's like within the same season. But this time around, I think you guys both brought up good points that, like Addison, when you mentioned that Washington was probably a little bit like overvalued by the market earlier in the year, and I think now they're probably undervalued. And I feel like this is like a weird line to me because I feel like Utah's being valued the same as if they did have their quarterback and running back. I have trouble seeing them be able to like consistently move the ball in this game. And I think Washington's going to be able to do just a little bit more to where I think this game is more like 7 to 10 points. So I'm not going to bet it, I don't think, but I definitely would lean Washington if I had to. The total's 45. I feel like that's kind of like a no bet. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Because I think this game clearly looks like it's going to be kind of ugly and defensive, but is there like a lean on that number at all, or do we even care to mention that?
I'm not really. I think it's going to be defensive like that, but 45 is just so low in college football.
Yeah.
In this day and age, I tend not to unless it's. Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's probably like a fair number.
I don't be low scoring though.
Yeah.
I feel like I would take this under in the regular season, but for some reason, I feel like conference championship games are a little more open,
Yeah, like teams are kind of just like laying it on the line. It seems like so maybe
Yeah.
they open it up a little bit more. Yeah, that's interesting to point that out. I do feel like we've talked about like when we get into bowl season, it seems like maybe bowl season's a little different, but like overs seem to hit a little more often from like what we've seen in the past. But all right, so we've got so far Clemson winning the ACC, Oklahoma Big 12, OSU Big 10, Washington Pac-12. So let's get into the last game, the SEC Championship, which Georgia is getting 13 points, I believe, at this point. I think it opened at 10.5. It got bet very quickly up to 14. And then I think there was some money back on Georgia at 14. Addison, I'll start with you this time. Your lean against the number, your thoughts on how this game is going to go. Does Georgia have a chance at actually pulling this off on the field?
Yeah, I think Georgia has a chance. In all the common opponents that these teams have played, Bama's been the better team in all of them. But I don't know. The two best defenses Alabama's played this year were LSU and Mississippi State. Both those teams held Bama under 30.
Yeah.
But neither of them could score on Bama. So
right.
That's the thing. I think Georgia is capable of doing that, and I think they can get the points. They can get some points too, like enough to keep it close.
Right.
So Georgia's still a question though. I haven't watched Georgia in a few weeks. They really haven't been playing any relevant games. Has their defense gotten better?
Yeah. So I guess I'll go real quick with this, and then I'll get back to Addison, and then we'll finish up with you, Dave. But I bet Georgia plus 14 when it got there. Addison kind of pointed this out that Alabama, Mississippi State is very, very good defensively, and they held Alabama to 4.2 yards per play, I think, in that game. But as Addison said, they just could not score, obviously. LSU, same thing, very underwhelming offense, very solid defense. Georgia, the last 5 games since the LSU game after their bye week, they've played some teams that can run the football. They've been pretty successful against them to where, like, they haven't been elite, but I think there's definitely been a shift in attitude. I've seen just more physicality on both sides of the line, actually. Where I think Georgia has a shot in this game, because I actually dug in Alabama pretty hard just to see if there was actually any kind of weakness at all. The only thing that I can really find is Alabama can be had sometimes with some explosive plays, as far as they can give up some stuff. I think it's mainly in the secondary. They've given up a little bit of explosive plays on the ground, but what I found was on standard downs, so like first down, 2nd and 7 or fewer, 3rd and 4 or fewer, like basically situations where you can run or pass on offense. Alabama is 66th in the country in giving up like explosive plays. So it basically like average, but Georgia's been able to spring some plays in situations like that. I think if Georgia is able to actually implement like some first down passes, maybe some play action stuff, try to spring some stuff on Bama, I think they do have a chance to put up some points in this game. I actually also took the over at 64 because I think Georgia's not quite as good as Mississippi State and LSU, so I think Bama's going to get in the 30s at least, but I think Georgia's going to do enough to keep this within the number, and I do think it'll be competitive towards the end, but I do like Alabama to finish up the season with a solid win against Georgia. So I'll go back to you, Addison, if you want to finish up your thoughts, and then your lean against the number and anything final that you had before we go back to Dave.
Yeah, I think Bama will win. I just think Georgia will be able to keep it within the number.
Yeah.
I think they'll get enough on offense. They'll keep it interesting. It might not be like a super close game or anything, but
Right.
it'll be watchable.
Yeah. And then Dave, you're leaning against the number. If you've made any bets on this game as far as like total or how do you see this game going? Any differently from Addison and I?
I see this as like a 49-21 type Alabama game.
Okay.
I did bet the over. I would lean Alabama winning by at least 2 touchdowns.
Okay.
I just like maybe Georgia's defense is playing a little bit better, but I've just seen them be pretty leaky this year. And I think they're going to give up a lot of explosive plays to Alabama. That's just what Alabama does. The only chance that I give Georgia in this game is Georgia can at times, and especially lately, they can control the ball with the run game. So if you can keep it close early, get a couple stops early, and be able to, continue to run the ball throughout the game, I think that's their chance to stay within the number. But if they become one-dimensional too early, I think they have no chance at staying within a couple touchdowns.
Yeah. So even with like I said, I do think Georgia's been improved the last 5 weeks of the year, especially on defense. But here are some quick metrics which could favor your lean as far as Alabama. So if Georgia can be had, it's that they do not tend to get to the quarterback. They really have lacked a pass rush this year, which is surprising for Georgia. They're also giving up, as far as like pass completion rate, they're pretty bad at that. Where they actually have been really solid is they actually have been really good preventing explosive plays. So maybe that's where they keep it within the numbers if they do prevent Tua from getting like too crazy. But like we said, this Alabama offense has looked pretty historic. So something's going to have to give there. As far as rush D, even with Georgia's improvement, they are 91st in stuff rate. They're pretty average efficiency-wise as far as just run D overall. So maybe this is a game where if Alabama can control it on the ground and then you're able to do a little play action off of that, I could see a scenario where Alabama takes advantage of that and they run away with it. But I think Georgia can do enough. So we all tend to agree, though, that Alabama is going to win the SEC championship. So, that's all your guys' previews.
I have a conspiracy theory on this one, though.
Okay.
I mean, so if you're Alabama and we're pretty sure that Alabama's in no matter what happens in this game. As long as even if they lose, as long as they keep it close, do you hold some things back knowing that you would play Georgia like 2 games in a row, and the next time you play them, when it would matter more for the college football playoff?
I think it's possible.
I don't know. Would Georgia jump to number 1 if they beat Alabama? Maybe not.
I think Clemson would.
Yeah.
And then I think Georgia.
There could be like a 2-3 matchup between Georgia and Alabama if it's close.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. I don't know. At the same time, though, if you're Bama, do you want Georgia the next game when Georgia's got like revenge on their mind? Also, but does it matter? Is Alabama just that much better to where they can toy with them like that?
I don't know. I feel like Alabama can kind of do whatever they want, control whatever they want this year.
So. What about this conspiracy theory? Do you think this is possibly valid where the SEC basically pays them, or somehow Bama's convinced to lose, so there's 2 SEC teams in the playoff?
Yeah, I just feel like that those weird kind of out there scenarios.
Yeah.
If Georgia wins in a close game, I might think those thoughts might pop into my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially I've thought of this conspiracy. What if Bama pretends Tua is hurt and takes him out or something?
Yeah.
And then they lose. Everyone would give Bama the benefit of the doubt there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, do we think if Bama loses, we all 3 still think they make the playoff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Unless they lose by like 40, which
exactly. That's the kind of thing that would have to happen. Like,
Yeah.
I'm assuming if they lose, it's going to be close.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, there are scenarios where they could, suck ass and miss the playoff, but yeah, more than likely they would still be in.
Well, I think in the last 10 years, when they've lost, it's only been like one time that the game's been lost by more than a touchdown. Like when they lose, it's just like you barely get them pretty much. And that's just,
the worst loss was that Auburn game last year.
Yeah, right. And they basically have a better squad with like a much better quarterback this time around. So, so
I feel like these teams, can't be that much further apart than they were in last year's national championship, right? I guess they didn't play half the game.
I think the year that Tua's got under his belt, and all those receivers having one more year of experience too. I think that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, I think part of it too is I think Georgia had a little bit more of a pass rush last year. Like that kind of concerns me a little bit this time around, but I don't know. If we get to Sunday night, like I'll ask you guys this, like both of you, and then I'll go after that or whatever. Who is in the playoff on Sunday night after all is said and done?
Based on our picks, it'll be Bama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma.
Okay, so you think even if based on what's the scenario? Is it basically that can OSU get in if Oklahoma wins like ugly and they blow out Northwestern, or do they just need Texas to win on the field?
I think Ohio State can get in if they blow out. You have to blow out Northwestern. It doesn't have to be like as crazy as Wisconsin a few years ago, but I think if you blow out Northwestern and Oklahoma just it's another one of those shootouts, and they continue to show their defense can't stop anybody. I think Ohio State can convince the committee that, hey, you can trust our defense to stop Alabama more than Oklahoma, so that's why we should get in.
Okay, yeah.
I agree with Tolman on that. I think that the committee is really looking at Oklahoma's defense. So I think if they win another shootout, that could hurt them, provided Ohio State looks really good in a win.
Okay.
That's like the biggest thing that people are looking at is Oklahoma's defense, because no one thinks that is a playoff caliber defense.
If Ohio State looks like they have been, before Michigan week, then they can win. They can win like that, and I don't think they have a chance. Ohio State really has to play like they did last week to convince the committee.
Yeah, I think it seems like they favor Oklahoma. I do think it's going to be Alabama and Oklahoma in Miami, and then Clemson, Notre Dame down in Texas. But I'm hoping. I think we're all obviously hoping that doesn't end up being the case. It's funny because I've talked to a lot of OSU fans this week, and they tend to want the Rose Bowl, and I keep arguing with them. You should always want to make the playoff because it's never going to be a guarantee that you're going to get there again. So I don't.
You mean you don't want to go? You don't want to just get in the playoffs and be blown out by Alabama?
That's what they're saying, yeah. And
I disagree with that take.
Yeah.
I think it's always better to make the playoff, and the kids that you're recruiting, they want to play in the playoff.
Right. Yeah, no,
that's where we're at now. The Rose Bowl, doesn't mean what it used to.
Right. That's what I told you.
I think no one in 2014 gave us a shot either.
Right.
But we were playing really well at the end of the year, and if you get in the playoff, anything can happen. So
yeah, that's the thing. It's
I say you always take that shot.
Right. There's no guarantee that you're going to lose, and like you said, I just feel like the kids that you have recruited, the kids that you're currently recruiting, they see that you're making the playoff. And I just think, like I said, let's say Urban Meyer does retire after this year, and then all of a sudden you do get like Corey from Denver scenario where you get a coach that you whiff on. I mean, look at Michigan. Do they feel like their fans feel like they're gonna make the playoff at any point soon here with how they've played against Ohio State? I mean, there's just no guarantee that you're always gonna get there. Like I think fans look at Alabama and Clemson and they're like, well, yeah, like if you have the right coach, like you're gonna get there and compete, but like I just feel like you should always want the shot no matter what. So I definitely disagree with all their takes. I think it's really weak, to be honest. But any final thoughts from you guys before we wrap it up?
I have a final question.
Okay.
If Ohio State plays like they did last week, can they win the playoff?
I don't think so this year, only
No.
because Ohio State's biggest weakness is like the absolute strength of Alabama. Like I do not see Ohio State's secondary stopping Alabama from doing whatever they want. Could Ohio State score on anybody? Yeah, if they play like that offensively, if the run game is actually fixed, which against Michigan it did look efficient. I think the passing game helped open that up. Then I think they can keep games competitive, but I have not seen enough from OSU through the first 12 weeks of the year to say after like the perfect spot to buzzsaw their rival that they're going to be able to stop like a team. Like here's the thing that's tough too is with the whole like OSU Oklahoma argument is I've seen a couple guys that are like the head odds makers for some of these books in Vegas that have that game if those two played like as a pick'em or like Oklahoma -1 maybe. But I feel like OSU would have to be like they would have to play like almost like a cleaner game just because like I feel like Oklahoma would be able to exploit OSU's secondary. And not that OSU obviously would not score like maybe every possession on Oklahoma, but I just feel like Alabama is going to actually be able to get stops and then exploit both of their secondaries to the point where I don't think either team likely would be able to win the playoff. Are they both dangerous enough that like there's a scenario it could happen? I mean, look, I guess like if OSU got in as the 4 seed and they got some turnovers and they somehow got by Alabama, then could they beat Clemson or Notre Dame? I mean, I think it's possible, but I don't think it's probable. Like I think it's very unlikely this year.
So even though our defense played so much better against Michigan, I think it's just because a lot of tackles were made that prevented some of the big plays that we've been seeing the whole year because tackles were missed. But if you look at it, sometimes Ohio State doesn't have much safety help, so I feel like Michigan didn't bust out those big plays because they didn't have the speed to separate, but Alabama does. So that's why I think I don't see Ohio State having a chance of winning the playoffs, even if we play like last week.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Addison, you asked the question. What do you think in that scenario then?
Well, yeah, I think if we play like last week, we can beat anyone.
Yeah.
In a one-game scenario.
Yeah.
I think like if we're playing a team like Bama, we have to couple it with a good pass rush, which we have some guys who can do that. I think you just gotta like try and bring a lot of pressure and force turnovers, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So the way we just like dismantled Michigan's defense, I mean, there aren't a lot of defenses that are going to be able to slow us down if we play like that. Even if some of them are more athletic than Michigan's.
Right.
But yeah, I think. I mean, the question is, can we keep doing that? So,
right.
I mean, we'll see.
Right. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
That was more of the Ohio State that we were expecting, like all season. We hadn't seen it.
Well, yeah, it's super frustrating because they played very inconsistently and like shit at times through 12 weeks, and then all of a sudden, to hang 62 on that kind of team, which we all generally agree that Michigan, I still think Michigan's a very good football team. I just think that matchup wise, as we said, like Michigan's going to struggle with teams with speed. And, when OSU showed up with some attitude and some passion, they showed what they're capable of, which we point out at the beginning of the year. This team on paper had as much talent as the program's ever had as far as like, they're 2 and 3 deep. So I just think they're younger. Maybe they are getting, maybe they finally have found something, but I just think overall I haven't seen enough from this secondary to think that they could possibly stop Alabama through the air. So, any closing thoughts after that, or anything from either of you two?
No.
Good. All right. Yeah. So we will be back. I don't know. I guess we'll have some pods coming up as far as like we'll have like a few pods that will cover some of these bowl games, like obviously the New Year's Six games and then the playoffs, of course. But I'm not gonna say exactly like there will definitely be a pod next week on something. I'm not sure yet, but you guys obviously check back on the channel. Check back later in the week for the picks against the spread. I forgot to put those up last week, so that was my bad. But yeah, so any questions or actually more likely comments or disagreements, you guys can put them in the section below the video there, of course. But yeah, until next time.